the on-track action has started for the year, and I have to say, I'm absolutely loving it. I think the new generation of car looks great. The colour schemes themselves are really good as well. The Ferrari that's just gone past in a deeper, darker red. I quite like the compactness of the cars as well. Slightly shorter, but a little bit chunkier. But beyond that, what are my Barcelona takeaways? The main thing, the buzzword you might have heard, is porpoising. Now, this is a phenomenon that happens pretty much at this point on track, where the cars sort of bounce as the underside of the car generates the downforce, and then at the moment it's stalling. So it's releasing the car, it squats down with the downforce, releases, jumps up as the floor stalls and the downforce goes, and you get this bouncing that we've seen from most cars so far. The Ferrari there with the DRS open, not having it so badly, but it's been something that's affected so many teams. Drivers probably finding it really hard work to concentrate on turn one here, to find that braking point as they're being bumped around a little bit, and teams having headaches as well, maybe parts stressing more than they would hope. And it's an area that everyone has to get on top of. For everything that we have, teams are looking at changes probably here as a sort of first and foremost thing. How can they do it? Maybe raising the ride height, maybe stiffening the suspension, or actually just making changes to the floor of the car. But either way, there's going to be compromises elsewhere where you want the floor really low down, generating as much downforce as possible. So it's a tricky and complex issue for the teams to get on top of as we move towards Bahrain. Well, for all the chat about porpoising, you might have expected there to be reduced mileage as cars may be struggling with parts falling off or drivers struggling for just a bit of physicality, but the mileage has been immense. Reliability has been so good for this test. So it's a little bit ironic that as I'm talking to you, there's a red flag out. And sadly, it's Alfa Romeo that's caused it. They're the team that has struggled the most so far this week for mileage. And Joe is in the gravel up at turn 10 as I speak. So not a reliability part right now, but they have struggled so far. And Valtteri Bottas has been probably the main man to lose out. New to the team leader really in many ways alongside a rookie. And he needs to get some miles in, but he hasn't had the chance thanks to a few issues, teething problems of a new car that Alfa Romeo have had. Haas struggling a little bit in the reliability department, missing some laps, and Nikita Mazepin pulling up short this morning as well. And Alpine a bit of an unknown at this stage. Good miles for the first couple of days, but possibly because they were turning the whip down a little bit, playing very conservative. Fernando Alonso driving this morning looked like he was just trying to crank it up, get some better pace out of the car, and the car went pop. So he's lost out a bit this morning as well. Everyone else flying on mileage, which is very, very important. Over 150 laps for Ferrari the first couple of days. Many drivers and teams getting over 100 a day. Really, really impressive for this new generation of car, but they need it. There's so many quirks to this car that they need to understand. And so every lap, as usual in testing, is critical. The performance of these 2022 cars was destined to be a little bit worse than we've had, with simulations ranging from a lot slower to actually not very much slower. And now we've hit the track. Overall, I've been quite impressed with the speed of the cars. They are a little bit slower, but watching here on day one at turn 9, you can see the speed through here. Lando Norris there at the wheel of the McLaren, and Max Verstappen standing almost flat out through there, even following a car. So high-speed performance, very, very good. The drivers are happy. The ground effect working really nicely, and they're able to get a lot of confidence from that. Top speeds are very high as well because the cars have trimmed out a little bit of the aero gubbins on the top. They're a little bit slicker. The rear ride heights are reduced to try and help keep that ground effect as well. So top speeds are good. The issue then is the low speed. They're arriving at really high speeds into the slower corners, trying to get the cars stopped. They're a bit heavier as well. They're a bit lumpy. They don't ride the curbs as well. And this is where the cars are losing a bit of performance. It'll be particularly obvious on street circuits like Monaco especially. But the final sector here, they're definitely struggling a little bit more. The other problem that is just starting to surface is possibly a weight issue in general. The cars are already nearly 50 kilos heavier, but the teams might not be able to get their car down to the weight limit. Now, when I was driving, that would mean a very, very lean Christmas. and trying to skin down as much as I can, save weight, and it'll happen that way. Now there's a minimum weight limit for the drivers, so they're not going to be too affected by this, but the teams are going to have to find other ways of trimming fat out of the car, basically, trying to get the weight down kilo by kilo, because if they're running overweight with these new regs, that's going to hurt them performance-wise, so that'll be another headache. We need to remember why we've got these new cars as well, from the really quick, super high downforce cars of 2021, these slightly heavier, bumpier, porpoising 2022 cars that are a little bit slower. It's all to improve the racing, and that's one big thing that everyone is hoping for is going to work when we have the first event in Bahrain. Has it worked? Well, so far, the feeling is yes. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz I saw from here having a really good run. On day one, afternoon, Carlos Sainz trying to hunt down Max Verstappen and kind of get into a bit of a race situation. The drivers are interested in whether they can get closer and get a feel for it as well. Out of curiosity, probably more than anything. And Sainz and Leclerc have both said, yes, it's pretty much night and day. Alex Albon as well, saying it's much better to follow with these new aero rules. So that's very encouraging. The other thing is the tyres. There are new tyres for this year, new wheels, 18-inch instead of 13-inch, and low-profile tyres as well. It all adds to the stiffness and the complexity of negotiating some of the slower corners here, but the construction has changed with a view to try and getting less thermal degradation. Now, this has been a problem for a while in Formula One, when the driver behind is not only in the dirty air caused by the aerodynamics of the car ahead, but his tyres then overheat, scrabbling around, and it's a sort of twofold effect. Pirelli are hoping this year that the thermal deg is reduced and the drivers can push harder into less dirty air, basically. So hopefully we get a bit of a double whammy on all of this. We're really going to find out in Bahrain. But so far, I think the jury's still out a little bit on the thermal deg of the tyres. Sometimes they're holding on a little bit more on the longer runs, but other teams reporting actually they're still fading away as they were before. Barcelona's a notoriously tricky circuit for tyres. I remember when there were 4 pit stops here for Fernando Alonso to win a race a while ago. So it is tricky, it's a difficult test for them, but so far the jury's out even more so on that. And the whole racing situation, I think, will unfold really in Bahrain. But so far, overall, positive rumours, and it looks the case from the trackside as well. As usual, probably what people really want to know is a rough idea of the pecking order, even at this early stage. As I mentioned before, it's difficult to get a real picture of Alfa Romeo because Valtteri Bottas, team leader, has barely done any meaningful running. But from what I have seen with Zhou and a few laps from Valtteri, hopefully they can get towards the midfield, but it's a big unknown. And similar for Haas, the car looks much better than it did last time, but still difficult to get a picture because they've missed so much running. But Mick Schumacher particularly looked okay on day 2. The other team struggling last year were Williams. I don't know how much further forward they can jump, but they've had a good test. Alex Albon's integrated himself well. They've done a decent run plan, got some miles in, and they look pretty quick. At the sharp end, there's 4 teams that have caught my eye. First of all, McLaren and Ferrari, 2 upper midfielders from last year, but can they make the jump to join Mercedes and Red Bull right at the front? They caught my eye immediately. The cars look good. The driver's able to be quite precise with a sharp turn in, but the rear's hanging on. And basically looked very strong early on, and the drivers are happy with it. Lando Norris, top day 1 with McLaren, and Charles Leclerc, day 2 for Ferrari. The times don't mean that much, but looking at the drivers, particularly Leclerc hustling the Ferrari with its sculpted side pods now and an innovative design, it looked really impressive. In recent years, Ferrari has been right on the edge or over the edge of drivability, and Leclerc's looked sometimes a little bit wild. He's looked on the edge this time, but it looks so much more controllable for him. So I think it's a really good baseline for them. Of course, the 2 that they're going to be chasing are the mighty Mercedes and the Red Bull team. Reigning champion Max Verstappen started a little bit slowly of the week. It looked like he maybe had a bit of fuel on board the Red Bull. The car was a little bit sluggish, but they were racking up the miles. But there's been more glimmers of hope and a bit more pace today, and Verstappen looks at home, whilst Checo Perez has had some more interrupted running. And Mercedes, a similar story really. Started off looking good. Lewis Hamilton looked like he was fighting the car a little bit more day 2, but they've come back again in the final day, and I'm sure they're going to still be a team to beat there or thereabouts. They're also the first team to really get into practice starts and some sort of race simulation run for Lewis this afternoon as well, which indicates they're pretty well through their run plan and seem very happy. But everyone's still scratching their heads. There's big development still to come. The pecking order is pretty much an unknown still at this point. hopefully we'll find out a little bit more in Bahrain next time out.